The debt illusion is that they say the United States can print all the money it needs. They say the debt doesn't matter. They say the empire will always stand. But Rockefeller would have looked at that and said, when the crowd believes in magic, it's time to count the coins. The truth? America is drowning in debt. The numbers are no longer theory, they are a ticking clock. Today, I'm going to walk you through what's really happening with the US budget, why they're lying to you, and how to think like Rockefeller in a world built on illusions. What nobody wants to say about public spending. Leadership isn't about slogans. It's about sacrifice. It's about making hard choices in the face of easy lies. And today, those in power would rather sell you a fantasy than tell you the truth. Public spending is out of control. Everyone knows it, even those writing the laws. But they're not cutting, they're expanding. They know the system is broken, and they're hitting the gas. Rockefeller would have called it what it is, theft. A silent tax through inflation, passed on to every citizen who saves in dollars, earns in dollars, and tries to build a future in dollars. The leaders know this, but they keep printing, because it's easier to lie than to lead. The math doesn't lie, but they do. Right now, the US deficit is over 9% of GDP. That's more than $2.5 trillion a year. They say it's temporary. They say they have it under control. But basic arithmetic says otherwise. If the national debt is already $34 trillion, and they're planning to add another 10 to 15 trillion over the next decade, ask yourself, who's going to pay for it? Who's going to buy that debt? China? The Fed? You? And here's the punchline. They plan to pay for it with money created out of nothing, not gold, not productivity, just digital ink. Would Rockefeller have trusted that? Systeme? You already know the answer. The lies of the experts. When someone tells you the US can never default because it prints its own currency, remember this. Hyperinflation is not a default on paper, it's a default on value. The Romans figured it out 2,000 years ago. When trust in the currency disappears, everything else follows. That's why emperors paid in gold, not promises. And today, what they're offering is nothing but promises. Experts like Bessent go on TV and say everything is fine, that the US can always pay its bills. But let me ask you something. If everything is fine, why is gold soaring? Why is Bitcoin exploding? Why are central banks around the world dumping dollars and buying hard assets? Because they know. And Rockefeller would have known too. Distraction in theater to keep the illusion alive. They perform. They say they're cutting spending. They introduce budget proposals with headlines like historic cuts. But what are they really doing? Eliminating unspent allocations, renaming programs, moving numbers from one pocket to another. In the end, the spending keeps growing and the public stays asleep. Rockefeller knew that power often hides in plain sight. He wouldn't listen to speeches. He'd read the balance sheet. And the balance sheet of the United States is bleeding. Why the debt is now unpayable. This is no longer a fiscal debate. It's a mathematical certainty. If you're running a $2.5 trillion annual deficit and your interest payments are exploding, due to rising rates, you are not on a sustainable path. Even if taxes go up, even if growth accelerates, the system cannot catch up. It's compound interest in reverse, digging deeper with every passing year. And yet they smile. They tell you to trust the process. But Rockefeller wouldn't trust a sinking ship with a confident captain. He'd build his own boat, the only honest assets. That's why today, smart money is moving fast. Into gold, into Bitcoin, into productive assets that don't rely on political games to retain their value. Because when a currency starts to rot from within, the only safe place is outside the system. Rockefeller understood this intuitively. He invested in assets with intrinsic value. Oil, land, infrastructure. He didn't trust promises. He trusted control. Today, Bitcoin is digital control. Gold is physical trust. And owning pieces of real functioning companies is a bet on human productivity, not government integrity. The power of opposite thinking. Here's what most people do when they hear about debt crises. They panic, they freeze, or worse, they believe. The media spin that everything is fine, but Rockefeller thrived by thinking opposite. When others ran from chaos, he studied it. When others feared the storm, he built shelter. Today, that means not just consuming information, but interpreting it, not just asking what's happening, but why it's happening, and who benefits. When you do that, you stop being a pawn. You become a player. What happens next? Here's what's likely. More debt, more money printing, more inflation, more pressure on the middle class, and eventually, a reckoning. Not tomorrow, not next week, but it's coming, because no empire, no matter how mighty, can outrun basic economics forever. The math always wins. Rockefeller would prepare now, quietly, intelligently, and when others finally realize what's happening, he'd already be in position. Your move. So what can you do? First, understand the game. Debt is the tool, inflation is the tax, and distraction is the strategy. Second, protect your wealth. Get exposure to gold, get exposure to Bitcoin, own assets that don't depend on central banks behaving well. Third, think like Rockefeller. Study incentives, anticipate power moves, build your own independence, because waiting for someone to save you is how you stay poor. This isn't fear. This is clarity. They're lying to your face. But you don't have to believe it. The question is, will you prepare or will you pretend? Rockefeller knew his answer. Now it's time to choose yours.